Something is off. Okay, it seems like it's working now. Okay, the purpose of this stream is to basically make a guide for drafting, but make it in a way that it's more readable and easier to grasp a sense of. So drafting is a process of selecting pretty much settings for a given best of a given, like for a duel, and a set of best of a number of games. I will be specifically explaining drafting for Anvil League, which is always a set of best of 5. Anvil League is pretty much a league made by players for players, and the main purpose is to improve our play and as well find people to play with and enjoy Age of Empires all together. So, drafting usually begins by selecting map bans. So having the map pool, you are able to ban maps. Specifically for the case in Anvil League, the map pool consists of the following maps. In this case, we are using Anvil League map pack that you can find on Wobbly. It has basically typical maps and some additional maps that are usually made either by members of Anvil clan, or just very interesting maps made by Age of Empires community. I probably need to add that when we are playing best of 5, the first map is always Arabia, and next 4 are chosen as followed. First, each player is banning one civilization, one map. Well, either way, what you want to do when you're banning a map is always to ban a map that is the least convenient for you. But what's even more important is that you know your enemy and you ban the map that your enemy is known to be good at. And that's how you ban maps. So in this case, since you're going to play Arabia as a first map, and let's say you're up against a player that plays very well and he's known to play a lot of Arena, you're gonna ban Arena and may follow it up with Regicide Fortress. I'm not saying those maps are the same, but generally speaking, you can use similar strategies. After that, you typically pick maps. In this case, each player is picking 2 maps, and what's most important is to pick a map that favors your style. You can have in mind that using a map or picking a map that is the least convenient for your enemy can be good as well. But in bold, in the notepad on the right, I marked the most important thing for each stage. After those steps, you already have 5 maps that both players know that they're going to play. So the next thing is drafting. And when it comes to picking civilizations, then you should be thinking about the most suitable civilization for each map before you draft. And then when you're drafting, when you're already in on the website for drafting, you can think about hard counters and versatility civilizations. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but let's just continue on for the general description of the process. As the last step, you have civilization selection. Is when you already have maps, you already have available civilizations. In the case of drafting for Anvil League, you get as many civilizations as there's going to be games. If all games are played. So there's no additional civilization picks. So when you select a civilization on the specific map, you pretty much should have predetermined idea of what you want to select for the specific map before you even start the game, the first one. So when you're bound to play civilizations you have chosen, and there's good the circumstances were good enough, you can have this situation when you are met with the possibility of switching your civilizations from the most obvious to the much less obvious and much less expected, because your enemy has certain civilizations which could be otherwise slightly countered. Such case could be Mayans versus Goths on a regicide fortress. Actually, the better situation, pretty much this situation has happened recently between Tato. Probably Tato. He prefers to be referred as Tato. And Mr. Yo in the Who's Number 2 finals tournament. In that situation, Tato had Mayans. Mr. Yo, as last civilization in the draft, picked Goths. So clearly, he wanted to counter Mayans with Goths on regicide. It was pretty clear that this is going to happen. What Tato did was pretty straightforward. It wasn't a godly move. It wasn't like he was thinking about weeks about doing that, or he waited his whole life to switch Mayans with cults. But this is what he did. He basically knew what Yo was trying to do, and he took cults instead of Mayans on regicide fortress. And he obviously won that game easily. In the end, he won this final 5-3, so this was very important match. This game, at least. So, this is when it comes to mind games. They are not tough, really. Everyone can pretty much come up with such strategy to switch. But when you select your civilizations, it may be good to keep in mind that some civilizations, if they are hard countering your enemy, or are versatile, so they can be switched on 2 chosen maps for the given best of 5. This may benefit you in a ways you may have not expected. So those are, you can see the maps we are currently using for Anvil League map pack. Yesterday I've casted a match between 2 Anvil members, and they've chosen some civilizations, some maps, and I want to guide you through the process of pretty much selecting civilizations for maps, and at least how I do that. You can use Excel or just a notepad. It's very similar in the way that you analyze the stuff. So this was those were the maps that were played yesterday, and what generally is done as preparation for maps is writing down the best civilization you can choose, you can have on a given map. In this case of El Dorado, I think we generally can agree that Chinese and Indians have the huge spike when it comes to efficiency on this map. And then they are followed by Slavs, Vikings, Incas, and Teutons. On Gold Rush, you list them from the definitely, objectively speaking, the best to the well-followed civilizations. You don't need to write all of them, not really. The more you write, the generally it's kind of better, but there's no point to go further than 5. On Gold Rush, Aztecs is definitely something you want to have. It doesn't mean that you're gonna definitely place them on Gold Rush if you have them. But objectively speaking, having Aztecs on Gold Rush is better than having Huns. At least, it slightly depends on the person and basically habits that they have. But I think most of the people would agree about Aztecs. Then they are followed by Mayans, Slavs, Huns, and Spanish. Spanish would be pretty good here for reasons. But I'm not gonna go deep into that because we're gonna concentrate on drafting more than anything today. Then you have Nomad. Generally speaking, like Chinese, Mayans, Malians, Persians are considered the best, and they may be followed up by Aztecs or something like that. But definitely those 4 would have a huge edge. On Rift Island, since you have Zebras, Mongols, then you can see Japanese, Aztecs, Vikings, Franks being played. Arabia is pretty standardish, and there's as many opinions as there are players, but usually it comes down to the big 4 of civilizations: Aztecs, Slavs, Mayans, Franks. And this is your pretty much your whole preparation that you definitely need before you go into the drafting. I as well wanted to add, when it comes to maps, don't put yourself in a box. I always like to say that. It doesn't matter whose home maps has been chosen. So which maps were whose home maps for players when they are drafting. It doesn't matter that you are the one, for example, to pick Nomad. You shouldn't be prioritizing picking a civilization on Nomad specifically because it's yours. Just have an open mind. You see 5 maps you are preparing for, and do it objectively to gain such a big lead as you can. Okay. So, but it doesn't stop there. You can go even further, a step more, and pretty much prepare your way of picking and selecting civilizations and bans in the draft. Because you can see that in this case, having Aztecs on Gold Rush, then compared to having Mayans or Slavs, is not so important. It doesn't give you such a lead as having Chinese over Slavs, Vikings, or Incas or Teutons. I'm saying as them, because Chinese and Indians, I'd say they are pretty similar. But think if you ban Indians in this situation, that gives you very powerful singular civilization. So as well, banning can make your picks more powerful. So, this was an example of basically having those maps and preparing for them. So, if you're watching it on YouTube, I'm going to present to you a new list of maps and try to prepare your own civilizations that would you consider the best on a specific map, just as it is on the screen right now. So those are maps. Maps that were chosen are Acropolis, Regicide Fortress, Migration, and Nomad. So try to write down your individual civilizations. So it's Acropolis, Regicide Fortress, Migration, and Nomad, and Arabia. So knowing how maps look, you can pretty much and see how pros are playing those games and which civilization they are picking. You can have a pretty reasonable grasp of understanding which specific bonuses can be applied in a way that give you even a bigger lead. So, yeah. So generally what I would say is that on Acropolis, I generally favor mobility civilizations, but Slavs definitely stand out because of their huge farming. And Acropolis is it's very hard to punish a greedy Slav player. That's why on Acropolis Slavs is very good. As I said, mobility, so Franks, Magyars. You can even go with forward, not only with scouts, but as well spearmen. And only purely because of those civilizations are have such a powerful spike, Indians can be chosen as well. Just a slight, I'm not saying a full counter, but as a slightly favored civilization other than them to play on Acropolis. On the Regicide Fortress, it's actually a little bit different because you can make many civilizations work. You can go with Slavs. I mean, Slavs are definitely one of the best. Mayans as well. Turks with Fast Imperial, definitely one of those three is something to to pick. And then you have like Vikings, Berbers, Spanish, Britons, Mongols, Portuguese, which with each of them you can do a great strategy and very, very hard to deal with basically tactic. Like with Vikings you can go fastish kind of imp with rampush. With Berbers you can go in and harass your enemy in Castle Age with your unique unit. Spanish similarly. With Britons you can either go make longbows or go for fast imp, trapping down your enemy. With Mongols you can even produce mango dice. Portuguese would go for kind of Imperial Age play, maybe making some of their unique unit as well. Migration is typically a water map. So seeing Italians, Vikings, Japanese, Portuguese wouldn't be really a surprise. On Nomad, I think it's everyone understand what good civilization are there. And Arabia, as I said, as many people, as many opinions. But usually you see those kind of civilizations. So having that written down, what you want to do is set your priorities, because not each civilization is favors picking like okay, as I said previously, picking one civilization, the first civilization on Arabia may not give you such a lead as picking first civilization on migration, comparatively speaking. Therefore, if you know that you're picking first, and you honestly, before the drafting, you should know who's drafting first. Is it you or is it your enemy? Because it's very different if you're the first to draft or the second. So let's discuss both examples. Let's start with the situation when you're picking first. So let's say you're the first one to pick. It means that basically, well, in my opinion, seeing those civilizations, those maps, having Slavs would give you a huge lead. Not only they are good on Regicide Fortress, Acropolis, and Arabia, so they are versatile in this map pool. As well, they are very often the best pick. So out of all civilizations you can get in this draft, having a Slavs is number one. So then you probably the biggest lead gives you having Italians on migration, then having Mayans on Regicide Fortress or on a Nomad. But we can see that specifically if you go for Italians, then you have them on migration, Slavs, you have them on Regicide Fortress, Mayans would have them on Nomad, Aztecs on Arabia, and Franks on Acropolis. And then you can see that if you pick Franks on Acropolis and Slavs for Regicide Fortress, what civilization you leave for your enemy? Well, Magyars. So what happens if you ban Magyars? In this case, you're going to get rid out of 3 best civilization on Acropolis, and your enemies has to take either Indians or even worse civilization for Acropolis. So you're gaining a huge lead on this map in terms of civilizations. Other than that, having Mayans on Nomad, if you get rid of Chinese, as well, comparatively to other civilizations, you're gaining a huge lead on Nomad. So this is a draft that would, if it went your way in such a nice fashion, you're definitely the one who understands drafting and who's making good decisions. What happens when you're picking as a second player? Well, generally, you don't want, for the same reasons we discussed, that first player wants to take Slavs, the second player wants to ban them. So this is quite straightforward, because if you allow enemy for taking Slavs, there's no such important civilization that you can take after him and gain a lead yourself. Not really. I'd say just ban Slavs and Italians. So you get rid of huge spike for enemy on migration and on regicide. I mean, Slavs would probably could go for so many maps here. So definitely Slavs and probably Italians. So you don't allow your enemy to gain such a lead. Then picking first Mayans would be good, mainly for regicide, as well for Nomad, for the same reasons as the first player wants to pick them. Then you want Chinese, because you can see if you pick Mayans and you follow it up with Chinese, you kind of slightly limiting yourself, because Mayans could be chosen on Regicide Fortress and Nomad. But if you pick Chinese, clearly you're showing that you're primarily aiming, your goal is to pick Chinese on Nomad, and Mayans, most probable it is to see them on the Regicide Fortress. And so in this way, you're limiting options for your enemy on Nomad very fast. Then you pick Franks, and you can see that having Slavs banned and picking Franks and then following it up with Magyars can as well limit your enemy in choosing a civilization for Acropolis. Even though your Magyars are willingly chosen to go for Acropolis, and Franks for completely other map. In this case, Arabia. So we go for Franks on Arabia and Acropolis, and Magyars on Acropolis. Apart from that, you still need to pick a civilization on migration, since you banned Italians, and let's say your enemy had could choose a civilization before you, you're not going to gain huge lead with taking like Vikings over Japanese or Vikings over Portuguese. At least not on our level. Because you still fall behind in early game when you cannot produce fire ships. That's why you can just wait for the pick for migration when the best civilization is banned. Just pick them last. But otherwise, if Italians were not banned, then they probably should be placed more higher in the list. So those were ideal picks. When there is no counter play during the drafting. So it's obviously different when everything comes down to the drafting process. If we can see that this is general idea. Can you see everything? Almost everything. Okay, so let's pretend that those players having the same... Okay, this is like ideal scenario. They both value civilizations in the same way. And they are thinking about the same way of preventing enemy from taking best civilizations, as well, like taking some civilizations from a specific map and forcing him to go for weaker civilizations. So it's a less realistic scenario, but we can still see in which way slight changes in the beginning, which is just an order of picking and banning, can influence the drafting. So again, they have the same goal, the same idea, the same understanding, but the only difference between them is who picks first and who picks second. So we're gonna practice Anvil League draft, which goes global ban, first person, second player 2 bans, then the last ban for the first person, then the first pick for the first person, and then 2x2 to the end. Global picks, global bans. So we're gonna start having the notepad next to us and pretending that we want to benefit each player individually, but as well equally as the other one. So we're gonna start drafting, and as I said, so we aim to ban Magyars, Chinese, so we gain advantage on Acropolis and Nomad. So we're gonna start by banning Chinese. And already it changes so much for the second player, because now Chinese are banned, so Mayans are even stronger than they were. That's why you cannot continue with... Slavs are still very, very much potent, so you ban Slavs, but you cannot really... You need to now decide if you prefer still going with your plan of banning Italians, or switch to banning Mayans. Well, specifically in this scenario, Mayans seem to be stronger, that's why you're going to ban exactly them. Then the first player was going to ban Magyars to gain the lead on Acropolis. And I think he's going to do that. He still can continue his plan. So he's going for Magyar ban. Once I find them, we can continue on. So now we can see that Magyars okay. Basically, at this point we can see that Italians could gain huge lead on migration comparatively to other civilizations. I don't see, since Slavs are... Oh, okay, I was late with that. Damn. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find a short key for crossing outwards. I'm gonna just speed up the process and to do the same thing pretty much. Okay, so it was Slavs first. Oh no, the first player doesn't ban Slavs. It's a mistake. Okay, Chinese, right? Chinese was the first ban. Then we'd expect to see Slavs and Mayans banned, and then it's most probable that you ban Magyars. And actually, now that I think about that, it depends if you are a water kind of player or not, really, because picking Franks would be very tough for player 1, because you pretty much leave out this civilization. For banning Magyars wouldn't be that good, so maybe you go for banning Turks. So now Slavs, Mayans, and Turks are banned. So your enemy cannot take this very powerful civilization and ready safe fortress. Then you follow it up either with Magyars on Acropolis, or pretty much Italians on Migration. I think this one is tough. It depends what you want. But since I like Acropolis, since I prefer land maps, I'd go for Magyars. It looks weird as a first pick, but if you think about that, if you have those civilization banned, maybe... Oh, okay, I see. Taking Slavs would be... I forgot about Franks. If anything, I should have picked Franks, right? So you can see I clearly needed more time than 30 seconds to decide. That's why you cannot go so deep into the process of drafting. If the players are doing exactly, they have the same mindset, because there is too much mind games involved. This is very different if there are even slight changes in understanding between two players. It's like a butterfly effect. You don't ban just exactly think what your enemy wants, and your enemy picks exactly that, but then he didn't pick what you wanted, so it goes really smoothly then. But in case when both players literally want the same thing and understand the game in the same exact way, it's much more complicated than it should have been. So, Chinese. So the second ban, you still have this Frank and Magyars. You still can use them. So if it's your first pick, maybe don't pick either of them. Just go for Italians, because let's say Italians give you huge lead on migration. Let's agree with that. And I picked Italians. Oh my god. Oh, sorry, that was a mistake. I was going to pick Italians. I forgot I was panning. Okay, so if we are going to pick Italians, damn, I'm halfway asleep right now. Then I probably want to ban Turks. Right. So the first draft was good. I simply forgot about what I was doing. Slavs. Then we discussed that Mayans are very powerful in this situation. And now we want to prevent your enemy from taking a Turks, which would be very good on a really safe fortress. And then you take Italians. Then your enemy, so your enemy has now a chance, since he picks 2 in a row, to pick Franks and Magyars, to take them on Arabia and Acropolis. Because this is huge. You're pretty much banning enemy from taking good civilization on Acropolis. So, taking Franks and Magyars right now, having in mind that Magyars are meant to go on Acropolis and Franks on Arabia, seems very powerful to me. So, now, being first player, you're kind of in tough situation, but it's still not that bad. Definitely you want to have Aztecs right now on for Arabia, and Arabia has been chosen for both players right You don't have a civilization for Regicide Fortress. So honestly, at this point, it doesn't really matter if you're getting the proper civilization on Regicide. I think you can take Malians. Malians for Nomad. And now it's basically, oh yeah, it's not that tough. Now it's pretty much straightforward. Because you're gonna, let's say Regicide Fortress, both players don't really want to pick anything special. So we take Vikings on migration. Just in case, actually, your enemy could pick Vikings for Regicide Fortress, preventing you having still good civilization there, but preventing you from taking them on migration, and then follow it up with Persians. So both players have chosen Nomad and Migration. Regicide Fortress has been chosen? No, it still hasn't. So, I mean, definitely Indians at this point, because you don't have a civilization or Acropolis. So both players have Acropolis civilization. And then the last pick for Regicide Fortress. Well, whatever you want. Let's go with Berbers. I'm not saying Berbers are in any way better than those. It's just that they are still decent. So here could come personal preferences, and you would say that, okay, I prefer something else. Surely you do. I'm just picking the first one I have written down. Although I was kind of grouping them from my favorites to the least favorite. Okay, so migration. Oh, sorry, I wasn't picking civilization. Okay, so the last one, it's gonna be randomized, but I'm gonna tell you which one should have been chosen. Let's see, we have Acropolis, Arabia, migration. The other user disconnected. I was practicing civilizations. What the hell? Okay, doesn't matter. Regicide. So we didn't steal. Oh yeah, we haven't chosen the civilization for Regicide Fortress here. So both players has chosen the civilizations for Regicide Fortress as the last one. So I suppose we can say that okay, he went for Spanish there, right? So let's say it, in the end, it ended up being okay. And we're gonna decide, we're gonna see who's, I'm sorry, who was the one to actually win the drafting. And is there potential for mind game switch from a certain civilization to the other one, middle games, and just, confuse your enemy and switch from a counter to a favorable position. So we have a okay, so Arabia would be played first, almost indefinitely. Well, in Anvil League, it's always Arabia first, so it would have happened potentially. Then let's say just we're gonna go in order of maps that are written down. It can slightly different when you have different maps. different order of maps, because then you can notice that you have a counter that you didn't actually see, because you weren't sure if your enemy chooses a specific civilization on a specific map. So the first player has Aztecs on Arabia. The second one has chosen Franks there. That's quite tough to read. Let's put some space between those maps. Acropolis, the first player chose Indians. The second one took Magyars. Regicide Fortress, the first player took Berbers. The second one took Spanish. Migration, the first one took Italians. The second one took Vikings. On Nomad, it's Malians against Persians. So you can see that this drafting is very consistent. The quality of civilizations is very good, very good. There is no civilization that you kind of go into the maps and you ask yourself, oh shoot, I have Aztecs and Spanish, and game maps that are left is Nomad and Migration, right? Because you took like good civilizations, but they are good on Arabia, or they are good on a specific map, but not those that were chosen for the best of 5. So it's your choice to decide. It's your decision who ended up with better civilizations here. Player 1 or player 2. Player 1 having Aztecs has probably a small lead on Arabia. On Acropolis, I think it's player 2 with Magyars, but it's still very slight. It's a nuance that need to be used efficiently by a person, by a player. Let me remind you that this is drafting. This is we are analyzing the best of 5 between players that have the same play style. So it could have been different. Taking into the level of pros again, specifically, let's say that we can Doubt and Livery are drafting against each other. If they use any preparation at all, because I can very often see that they put less preparation to their final games in tournaments that have a price of $10,000 or more than I put preparation for my casual best of 5 against Blum, let's say. This is the level of pros we have in Age of Empires. In any case, so it's very slight difference. It's up to the player to prove that his civilization is better. Then we have on Regicide Fortress, Berbers and against Spanish. You can see that in this case, even though those two civilizations are kind of on the same like quality level, but clearly in the specific scenario of those two fighting each other, Berbers have a lead because of their unique unit specifically has a bonus damage against the unit of Spanish. So here is kind of a thing you cannot really rationally predict to happen when you're choosing Spanish. But in this case, player 1 has a lead just with the civilization. So I was going to mention the case of drafting, Leary drafting is Doubt. Because in their case, it's slightly different because Leary is a very micro-heavy player. is a kind of like micro nerd. So there are civilizations that favor such an attitude, such an tactic, commitment in the game, and there are other civilizations which are much easier to use efficiently if you have a good economy management, such as basically a civilization that can place 3 town centers. I mean, Daud is usually going for adding additional town centers, so it was generally better for him to have Aztecs over Franks, because with Franks you want to be aggressive in Fast Castle because this is how your civilization is where your civilization is benefiting from. So those minor things can be different when two players that are drafting against each other have a clearly different attitude towards the game. Right. So on migration, so this can influence drafting as well. On migration, Italians versus Vikings, as well, slight lead towards Italians. So yeah, and on Nomad, Malians against Persians, I'd say it's pretty much equal. So player 1 has a slight advantage on 1, 2, 3 out of 5 maps. Is it enough to say that first person choosing in drafting is always better? Well, probably not. But remember that as a second player, you are forced to think, to predict, to see what your enemy is going for, and to counter it. If you make one mistake, you ban wrong civilization. As a second person that picks civilization in such a short best of 5 that it is, then you're gonna suffer a lot. Because if we didn't ban Slavs or Mayans there, we would be in a great danger later on. And still, first player was on the top, having slightly better civilizations. It was in the end equal. But what I'm saying is the first person to draft has a lead. Well, in any case, that was drafting with RediRodion. You can find me on Twitch, or you can add me to friends on Discord as well. If you want to discuss with me any specifics regarding drafting, I always love to do that. So it would be a pleasure to me to do that. Other than that, I may be streaming today later on, Corazini. I hope we can play some clan games, team games later on. So, bye bye.